I felt the polished marble floor of the St. Regis ballroom cool beneath my feet, a stark contrast to the burning humiliation scorching my cheeks. The air, thick with the scent of lilies and old money, seemed to vibrate with a false sense of triumph. On the glittering stage, bathed in the warmth of strategically placed spotlights, my husband, David Sterling, stood beside a colossal screen displaying the magnificent renderings of the Heritage Tower, a project that had consumed my life for the past year. He was beaming, accepting accolades from a crowd of New York City's elite investors. Developers, architects, and socialites, all dressed in their finest clinking champagne glasses. Then, with a flourish that felt sickeningly theatrical, David called his younger brother, Mark, to join him. Mark, a recent MBA graduate with absolutely no architectural training, but always the favored son, the golden boy. And to my brother, Mark, David boomed. His voice amplified through the opulent hall, echoing off the gilded ceilings, whose insightful guidance and visionary input helped shape this magnificent design. I dedicate this evening's success. Mark, smirking, accepted a gleaming crystal award, a purely symbolic gesture that felt like a dagger twisting in my gut. He clutched it to his chest, posing for the flashing cameras as if he had single-handedly conjured the skyscraper from thin air. My mother-in-law, Patricia Sterling, a woman whose pearls seemed to constrict her neck as much as her rigid views constrained her mind, sat just a few feet from me. She leaned over to her husband, Robert, her voice a stage whisper designed to carry just far enough to reach my ears. Such a triumph, isn't it, Robert? So glad David eliminated Sarah's overly green ideas. Her eyes, sharp and cold as shards of ice, flickered to mine. A triumphant glint acknowledged my presence and her deliberate public jab. It was a sneer cloaked in civility, a master class in passive aggression. A strange, eerie calm settled over me. There was no lump in my throat, no tears stinging my eyes, just a chilling clarity that cut through the haze of shock. The initial wave of disbelief, the agonizing twist of betrayal, it all congealed into a hard, cold resolve. This wasn't just David forgetting to credit me. This was a calculated, orchestrated erasure. Every condescending remark, every dismissed idea, every subtle exclusion from family gatherings, every whispered aside, it all led to this moment. They had built this stage, set the lights, and written the script for my public humiliation. My mind raced, assessing the situation. The audience was captivated by David and Mark's performance. They were still basking in the glow of the Heritage Tower reveal, unaware of the poisoned undercurrent. I glanced at my watch. 20 minutes. That's all I needed before the formal auction began, before the room truly settled, before they realized I was gone, before they realized their carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. My heart pounded a slow, steady rhythm, a war drum announcing the reclaiming of my dignity. I rose, not in a fit of rage, but with a deliberate, almost surgical precision. My Valentino gown, a deep emerald that mirrored the hue of my stolen Echo designs, felt like armor. I exited the ballroom, heading not for the main doors, but towards the back service corridors, a route I knew intimately from months of event planning. My phone was already in my hand, my fingers flying across the screen. The script they wrote. I was about to rewrite it with a much more satisfying ending. My name is Sarah Hayes, and 5 years ago, I was just a hopeful architect with a dream. Fresh out of the University of Oregon with a master's in sustainable architecture. I launched Hayes Architecture from a tiny rented office above a coffee shop in downtown Portland. Was a shoestring operation, fueled by late-night coffee and an unwavering belief that design could and should coexist harmoniously with the environment. I envisioned buildings that breathed, structures that gave back more than they took, spaces that fostered well-being for both their inhabitants and the planet. My early years were a grind, I took on every small project I could get my hands on: a rain garden for a community center, a solar panel installation for a local brewery, a small-scale affordable housing project with passive heating and cooling. Spent countless hours researching biomimicry, permaculture principles, and cutting-edge energy-efficient materials. My first major break came with the Evergreen Collective, a multi-unit co-housing development that incorporated rainwater harvesting, geothermal heating, and a thriving rooftop community garden. It wasn't just about throwing in some green features. It was about designing a truly integrated system. For instance, our closed-loop graywater recycling system, reusing water from sinks and showers for irrigation, reduced water consumption by 60%, the fact I proudly presented at design conferences. It was featured in Architectural Digest, not for its grandiosity, but for its intelligent, thoughtful sustainability. That project put Hayes architecture on the map in the Pacific Northwest, earning me a reputation for meticulous planning, creative problem-solving, and an unwavering commitment to green principles. My firm became the go-to for clients who cared about more than just square footage. They cared about legacy, about impact, about genuine sustainability. That's how I met David Sterling, who's a rising star in the Sterling Group, his family's long-standing real estate development firm based in New York, but always looking for new markets. He'd approached my firm for a consultation on a smaller residential project in a burgeoning Portland neighborhood, intrigued by my portfolio of sustainable designs. He was tall, with an easy charm and a seemingly progressive outlook, a sharp contrast to the old-money cutthroat developers I usually encountered. He spoke passionately about integrating eco-friendly practices into large-scale urban projects, a vision that resonated deeply with my own. "You're the architect everyone's talking about in the West Coast green scene," he'd said, his eyes bright with what seemed like genuine interest as we walked through the Evergreen Collective. My family is traditional, very rooted in classic brick and mortar. But I believe the future, and frankly, the market, is in sustainability. We need someone like you to bring us into the 21st century. He even used terms like net zero ready, designed to produce as much energy as it consumes, and bioclimatic design, optimizing a building's orientation and form to respond to local climate, making me believe he truly understood my passion. One project led to another, and soon our professional collaboration blossomed into a personal one. David pursued me with the same intensity he brought to his business deals. He was attentive, supportive, sending me flowers to my office, surprising me with weekend trips to remote cabins, and always asking about my designs. He seemed genuinely proud of my work, often bringing up my projects in conversation with his friends. He made me feel seen, valued, like my vision mattered. Of course, there were warning signs. His mother, Patricia Sterling, was the epitome of old New York aristocracy. Her posture was ramrod straight, her pearls perfectly matched, and her opinions carved in stone. During our first family dinner at their sprawling Hamptons estate, Patricia barely concealed her disapproval. "Sarah has such practical ideas, doesn't she, David?" she'd remarked, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, a thinly veiled condescension in her tone. "So Portland. Our projects are more about legacy, of course, grander scale, not quite boutique." She implied that my eco-conscious designs were quaint, perhaps even unsophisticated. Certainly not grand enough for the Sterling name. It's traced its wealth back to early 20th century steel and railroad magnates. Robert Sterling, David's father, a quiet man with shrewd eyes, would merely nod, occasionally adding a comment about market viability that felt like a subtle dismissal of my sustainable principles. And David, he'd just clear his throat. A small, nervous gesture, an attempt to change the subject. "Mother, Sarah's work is groundbreaking. She's changing the industry, bringing innovation that will redefine urban living." But he never directly challenged Patricia. He'd just offer me a sympathetic glance, a gentle squeeze of the hand under the table, and then whisper, "It's easier to just let her have her way, sweetheart. She means well." I overlooked these moments, blinded by the love I felt for David and the fervent belief that he truly valued me for who I was, not for what my burgeoning green reputation could provide to his family's empire. I convinced myself that his love would be enough to bridge the gap between our worlds. When David proposed 18 months after our first meeting on a blustery autumn day overlooking the Columbia River Gorge, I said yes. I was eager to merge our lives, and more importantly, our professional visions. The wedding was a lavish affair, held at their family estate in Connecticut, complete with a marquee the size of a small airport hangar. Patricia had strong opinions on everything, from the floral arrangements to wild. Sarah, they need more structure to the guest list. We simply must invite the Vanderbilts. Regardless of whether you know them, constantly trying to steer my minimalist, natural aesthetic towards their preferred opulence. David played peacemaker, always whispering, "Just for today, honey." It's important to her, but he rarely contradicted his mother directly. He'd just offered me a sympathetic glance, a gentle squeeze of the hand, and then whisper, "It's easier to just let her have her way, sweetheart. This is important to her." After the wedding, the undermining intensified subtly at first, then more overtly. Despite bringing my expertise to several Sterling Group projects, my designs were consistently altered without my full consent. Ideas initially embraced by David would somehow morph into collaborations with Mark, David's younger brother, who had an MBA but absolutely no architectural training or genuine interest in sustainability. Mark's contributions usually involved adding more glass, more marble, and less consideration for energy efficiency. He'd suggest replacing a carefully calculated solar passive design using sunlight for heating in winter with a mere decorative skylight, or swapping out a living green wall, a vertical garden that improves air quality and insulation for a flat, generic facade at family gatherings. My accomplishments were dismissed as mere artistic endeavors or quaint Portland notions. Sarah has such a flair for these things. Patricia would often tell her society friends, patting my arm condescendingly, as if I were a particularly talented seamstress. It's almost like having a personal design consultant for the firm. So convenient for David to have her little input. David, once again, would just shrug and tell me later, "That's just how my mother is, honey. Don't take it personally." But it was personal, and it chipped away at my sense of worth, my professional identity. It was a constant, insidious erosion of my confidence, masked by polite smiles and platitudes. I started to feel like a prop, an accessory to their polished, privileged lives rather than a partner. Then came the Heritage Tower project. It was David's brainchild, a gleaming, sustainable skyscraper intended to be the Sterling Group's landmark project, solidifying their legacy and, as David put it, showcasing our commitment to a greener future. He'd told me it would be my magnum opus, a chance to truly push the boundaries of eco-architecture on a grand scale. I poured my heart and soul into it, spending late nights at my Portland office, leveraging every contact, every innovative technique I knew. I envisioned a building that was a living ecosystem, not just a steel and glass monument. I designed integrated solar panels, rainwater capture systems that fed into vertical gardens, and a geothermal HVAC system that would make it one of the most energy-efficient skyscrapers in the country. I even developed a unique envelope optimization strategy, designing the building's outer skin to minimize energy loss that promised unprecedented energy savings. It was during the initial planning phases, when I was given access to the Sterling Group's internal financial documents to understand the budget constraints and funding structures, that I stumbled upon the first cracks in their gilded facade. Large, unprecedented loans from obscure offshore entities, properties mortgaged to the hilt, and a dwindling cash flow that indicated severe liquidity issues. The Sterling Group, far from being the unshakable titan David presented, was in serious financial trouble, teetering on the brink of significant debt, much worse than David had ever let on. The Heritage Tower wasn't just a legacy project. It was a desperate Hail Mary attempt to attract new, major investors and pull the company back from the abyss. I felt a cold knot of dread tighten in my stomach. I told myself it was temporary, that David would explain everything once the project was secure, that he would appreciate my discretion. I even dipped into my own firm's emergency fund, the one I'd meticulously saved for future investments in Hayes architecture, to cover some immediate project-related expenses when Sterling Group's payments were mysteriously delayed. I reasoned. It was an investment in our shared future, our partnership. Then came the morning. A few weeks before the gala, David was in the shower, the steam from the bathroom fogging the polished mirror of our sleek, minimalist Portland apartment. His phone vibrated insistently on the nightstand. I never checked his phone. I'd always respected his privacy, believing trust was the cornerstone of any strong relationship. But something about the insistent buzzing, coupled with the growing unease I felt about our marriage and the Sterling's financial opacity, made me glance down. A message preview from E flashed across the screen. Can't wait to finalize the details with your family. David, Emily, and I are ready to invest. The future looks bright for the new Sterling Group. Emily Carter. The name struck me like a physical blow. Emily Carter, David's college girlfriend whose family owned a vast, multi-billion-dollar real estate portfolio and whom Patricia had always adored. The perfect match for the Sterling legacy. My fingers moved without conscious thought, as if guided by an unseen force, opening the message thread. My breath hitched, a sharp, painful intake of air. The messages went back months. Plans for their future. Discussions about a joint venture to recapitalize the Sterling Group. And then the sickening revelation. Draft separation papers. Prepared by the Sterling family attorney, dated 2 months prior. A proposed settlement offering me a pittance, completely ignoring my intellectual property and contributions to David's projects. But the true gut punch was the final document. A detailed script. An actual script written by Patricia herself, outlining how David would announce our amicable, mutual decision to divorce at the upcoming 50th anniversary gala, right after he presented the Heritage Tower project, the perfect, carefully stage-managed exit for the unsuitable wife, designed for maximum public impact and minimum social embarrassment for the Sterlings. My own professional funeral disguised as a celebration. My hands trembled violently as I photographed each page with my phone, the click of the camera a shocking punctuation in the quiet apartment. I forwarded them to myself, then meticulously deleted the evidence from his phone, clearing the message history, emptying the trash, leaving no trace. I plastered on a smile, went through the motions of our morning routine, even made him his favorite green smoothie, all while my mind raced, numb with betrayal. I continued to immerse myself in the final preparations for the gala, maintaining my professional facade. I wouldn't confront David, not yet. I would let events unfold as they had planned, and when they did, I would be ready. The script they wrote, I was about to rewrite it with a much more satisfying and public. Ending the week leading up to the Sterling Group's 50th anniversary gala was a blur of calculated exclusion. A masterclass in psychological warfare. Each morning I'd wake up hoping for a shred of normalcy, only to be met with another subtle dismissal. David was perpetually busy, always rushing off to investor meetings that somehow never included me. He'd leave hastily scribbled notes about breakfast with his father or an unexpected meeting with Mark. Always an hour before I typically woke up. My input on the final touches for the Heritage Tower exhibition space was consistently overridden by Mark, who, despite his newfound role as design consultant, couldn't tell a tensile structure from a tent pole. He'd proposed cheap, aesthetically jarring changes, like replacing my meticulously planned photovoltaic facade A building's exterior that generates electricity from sunlight with generic glass panels, claiming it was more cost-effective, while completely destroying the building's energy performance. Oh, Zara, David and I decided to go with the more classic finish for the model, Mark would casually say, waving a dismissive hand at my carefully chosen sustainable materials. Palette. He'd point to cheap, glossy veneers instead of recycled wood, or suggest an outdated HVAC system instead of the geothermal one I'd meticulously designed. Mother thinks it's more in line with the sterling aesthetic. He'd add that smug, self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. I would clench my jaw, my heart aching with each compromise. Each erasure of my vision. I started to feel like a ghost haunting my own creation. My colleagues from Hayes Architecture, who had poured their talent into the initial designs, would call me, puzzled by the last-minute changes. Sarah, did you sign off on this change to the lobby's natural ventilation system? A design strategy using natural airflow to cool a building? It compromises the entire airflow. My senior associate, Ben, asked me one morning, his voice laced with concern. I had to lie, blaming client demands and budget constraints. The lies tasted bitter like ash. I'd make excuses too. Return to my office in Portland or to our apartment in New York, anywhere I could be alone to document. Screenshots of emails where I was deliberately left off crucial communication chains. Photographs of my original signed sketches for the Heritage Tower next to the revised versions that bore only Mark's name or simply Sterling Group Design Team. I meticulously gathered internal memos from David's office, revealing how they planned to minimize my contribution in all press releases. I even found Patricia's crisp, elegant handwritten note to David, tucked inside a folder marked Gala. Logistics. Once this unpleasantness with Sarah is behind us, Emily's family will be welcomed as proper partners. Her father is eager to get this deal done without any complications. I felt a sickening lurch in my stomach. Unpleasantness, complications. I was nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle to their grand plan. A piece of debris to be swept aside before their meticulously staged triumph. My pain transformed into a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just about my work being stolen, it was about my entire presence being negated. My exit pre-orchestrated. A week before the gala, the final, undeniable insult arrived. I had flown back to New York for final preparations, staying in a separate suite at the St. Regis, ostensibly to focus better on the exhibition setup. I was walking past Patricia's suite one afternoon on my way to a meeting with the hotel's technical team when I overheard her voice. She was on a speakerphone, her imperious tone echoing faintly through the solid hotel door. Yes, I've confirmed with David, the revised program has been sent. And please ensure that Emily Carter is seated prominently, front row center, right beside the board. We want her family to feel integral tonight. As for Sarah, yes, David has informed me. She'll be there in a supporting capacity, of course. No need for special attention. She's aware she'll be stepping aside from future involvement. Family matter, you understand? No need for questions when she makes her exit. The phrase stepping aside echoed in my mind, ringing with the cruel clarity of a bell, tolling my demise. This wasn't just a miscommunication or a snub. This was a premeditated public execution of my role, my marriage, and my reputation. The pain of betrayal, which had been a dull ache, now sharpened into a searing agony. They weren't just taking my work. They were taking my story, rewriting it to suit their own narrative of control and entitlement. But in that moment, something shifted inside me. The tears I'd refused to shed, the silent screams I'd choked back, they solidified into a core of unyielding strength. I wouldn't be a victim. I wouldn't step aside quietly. I wouldn't allow them to write my ending. I would turn their meticulously planned humiliation into their downfall. The game had truly begun. I walked to my suite, my steps measured, my mind racing. I pulled out my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard. This was the moment of decision. I started preparing the ultimate countermove. I uploaded all the evidence, the email chains, the financial documents, the draft divorce papers, David's speech script, Mark's incompetent suggestions, masquerading as input, Patricia's damning notes to a secure cloud-based server. I created a presentation linking each piece of evidence to a narrative that exposed their deceit layer by layer. I also prepared a specialized software script designed to hijack the main presentation system at the St. Regis, allowing me to project my own content onto the massive screen during David's presentation of the Heritage Tower. It was a risky move, but the sheer public nature of the event was both their weapon and my opportunity. My architectural background had taught me to identify structural weaknesses. Now I was applying that knowledge to their carefully constructed lies, my original blueprints. The ones bearing my indelible mark would be the foundation of their public downfall. The gala wasn't just a celebration anymore. It was to be their reckoning. I meticulously double-checked every connection, every file, every timed sequence. I even created a dummy file to test the system earlier in the day, under the guise of final technical checks for the Heritage Tower visuals. No one suspected a thing. They were too busy congratulating themselves on their brilliant manipulation. I was no longer a victim. I was the architect of my own justice, drafting their demise with the same precision I applied to a complex structural analysis. The morning of the gala dawned crisp and clear in New York City. A deceptive calm before the storm. I woke early, slipping out of bed without disturbing David, who was still sound asleep, no doubt dreaming of his impending triumph. The day's schedule was packed. A final walkthrough at the St. Regis exhibition space, a quick solitary lunch, then back to the hotel suite to prepare for the evening's grand celebration. As the architect primarily responsible for the exhibition setup, I needed to arrive well before the guests to ensure every detail was impeccable. I spent the early afternoon at the St. Regis Ballroom, making what appeared to be final adjustments to the Heritage Tower exhibition space. The grand hall, adorned with cascading floral arrangements and glittering chandeliers, hummed with the last-minute energy of a high-profile event. The vast 3D model of the Heritage Tower, meticulously crafted, stood proudly at the center of its dedicated exhibition area, illuminated by carefully positioned spotlights. I personally inspected every detail, from the engraved plaques crediting the various Sterling Group departments my name, now almost an afterthought, was tucked away in tiny print to the sleek touchscreen displays that allowed guests to explore the building's innovative features. Beneath the main display table, hidden from plain sight, was a small auxiliary screen connected to the main projection system. I had installed it weeks ago, ostensibly for technical backup during the complex presentation, but in reality it was my silent accomplice. A single deliberate touch, and it would project whatever content I had preloaded. Everything was to my satisfaction. My professional pride, despite everything, demanded nothing less than excellence. Even for the stage of their downfall, I returned to our suite to change into the midnight blue Valentino gown I'd purchased specifically for tonight. It was a masterpiece of elegance, subtly shimmering, and I felt a strange sense of irony wearing it to what was, for me, a battleground. As I applied my makeup with steady hands, carefully lining my eyes, I studied my reflection. 5 years of trying to fit into a world that was determined to reject me had taken their toll, but not in the way the Sterlings might have hoped. Instead of breaking me, they had hardened my resolve. The woman staring back at me wasn't naive Sarah who longed for acceptance. She was a woman forged in fire, ready to reclaim what was hers. The Sterling family had arranged to meet in the main lobby before ascending to the ballroom. I arrived precisely on time, descending from the elevator to find them all waiting. A gleaming tableau of old money privilege. Patricia, resplendent in a sapphire gown that seemed to absorb all the light, her diamond necklace catching every glint. Robert, sternly formal. Mark, preening next to his fiancée, his chest puffed out with undeserved pride. David's eyes widened slightly when he saw me. A flicker of something unreadable, perhaps remembrance of what had once attracted him to me. Or perhaps a quick calculation of how soon he could be free of me, his eyes already betraying the exhaustion of maintaining his multiple deceptions. "Sarah, darling, you look simply lovely," Patricia said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Air kissing near my cheeks, careful not to smudge her perfect lipstick. We were just waiting for the last of our essential guests. The implication was clear, cutting, and delivered with a smile. I was not essential. I was merely present. A formality. The elevator ride to the ballroom was short, filled with artificial chatter about the day's activities from which I'd been pointedly excluded. Patricia and Mark spoke loudly about a private client lunch they'd had with Emily Carter's family, casually dropping names of influential investors and hinting at future collaborations. David beside me placed his hand at the small of my back, a gesture that once felt intimate but now seemed performative. A last-ditch effort to maintain appearances for the benefit of the discreet elevator attendant. The doors opened to reveal the stunning ballroom I had designed for their exhibition, now transformed into an elegant setting for the evening, sparkling under the soft glow of myriad chandeliers. How fitting! The Colosseum stood illuminated against the night sky, a testament to both grandeur and the inevitable fall of empires. Or in this case, the impending fall of one. Patricia entered first, regal and imperious, greeted with enthusiastic applause from waiting board members and high-profile guests. One by one, everyone moved toward their assigned tables, or gravitated towards the Heritage Tower exhibition, which was already drawing a fascinated crowd. I followed behind David, who moved purposefully toward the stage, where he would deliver his keynote address. I approached the exhibition space, making my way through the clusters of admiring guests. I found my spot beside the main display table, casually resting my hand on the hidden auxiliary screen, my heart beating a steady, silent rhythm. David, meanwhile, was introduced by Robert Sterling, who delivered a short, glowing introduction. David then took the stage, confidently outlining the Sterling Group's legacy, their vision for the future, and then the grand reveal of the Heritage Tower. He spoke passionately, weaving a narrative of innovation and environmental responsibility, using phrases I had coined, concepts I had painstakingly developed. "And to my brother, Mark," David continued, his voice swelling with feigned emotion, his eyes briefly flicking towards me with a fleeting, almost imperceptible hint of guilt, whose keen eye and insightful guidance were instrumental in bringing this vision to life. "I dedicate this achievement." He beckoned Mark to the stage, who, with an almost comical self-importance, basked in the spotlight as he accepted the award. Patricia and Robert beamed from their front row seats, throwing triumphant glances towards me, their faces alight with satisfied malice. In that moment, a chilling calm descended. I could have screamed, could have rushed the stage, demanded recognition, exposed their lies in front of everyone. That's what they expected. What they had prepared for, Patricia would have swept in, a picture of maternal concern, to comfort David over his unstable wife, and the divorce narrative would have written itself, painting me as the emotionally volatile architect who couldn't handle the pressure. They had anticipated a public outburst, a scene. Instead, I straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin, and with a single deliberate tap, I activated the hidden screen. My resolve was iron. I had allowed them to insult me, to minimize me, to steal from me for the last time. Now, it was my turn to redefine the narrative. The murmurs began softly, a gentle hum of curiosity, then grew into a collective gasp that rippled through the ballroom, silencing the clinking of champagne glasses and the polite chatter. On the colossal screen behind the Heritage Tower, Model, which had moments ago showcased David's grand vision, a new projection flickered to life. The pristine renderings of the skyscraper vanished, replaced by a rapid-fire sequence of higher-resolution images and text. It began with my original, signed blueprints for the Heritage Tower, complete with my distinctive architectural sketches, detailed annotations, and patent-pending numbers. My signature, clearly visible, was starkly contrasted with the simplified, uncredited versions that had been displayed moments before. Then email screenshots flashed across the screen, conversations between David and Mark discussing how to rebrand. My eco-centric ideas, how to soften my name on the official documents, how to integrate Mark's consulting role. One particularly damning email from Mark read, "Just keep Sarah focused on the visionary stuff. We can handle the practical details and credit later." Mother wants this to be a family triumph. Another email from Mark to David, dated just weeks ago. Discussed replacing my proposed rainwater harvesting system, collecting and storing rainwater for non-potable uses with a cheaper, purely decorative water feature. The images shifted, revealing more explosive content. Financial statements from the Sterling Group showing massive, undisclosed debts, billions of dollars incurred from failed investments and shady offshore dealings. Screenshots of obscure offshore accounts, a complicated web of transactions. That screamed money laundering. Bank transfers to various shell companies listed as consulting fees or unspecified acquisitions. It was a clear paper trail of financial distress and blatant misconduct. This wasn't just poor management. It was a systemic unraveling. And then, the true gut punch. The most damning revelation. A series of personal emails and text messages between David and Emily Carter discussing their plans for a joint venture, a new beginning, and yes, their upcoming marriage after David's amicable separation from me. There were photos of them together, intimate dinners, weekend getaways, all dating back over a year. The screen even displayed a scanned image of the draft separation papers, complete with the script David had prepared for his announcement. Tonight, Sarah and I have mutually decided to pursue separate paths. A difficult but amicable decision made with respect and understanding for our individual careers. The entire sequence played on a continuous loop, undeniable proof of their calculated betrayal and pervasive fraud, visible to every single person in that glittering room. On stage, David's voice faltered, trailing off into an inaudible whisper. His eyes, initially confused by the sudden change in the screen, widened in horror as he recognized the content. He fumbled with the microphone, then dropped it, the dull thud echoing in the sudden stunned silence that had fallen over the ballroom. He stared at the screen, his face draining of all color, his lips moving soundlessly like a goldfish. Patricia and Robert, from their front row seats, turned ghastly white, their faces a mixture of disbelief, dawning horror, and rapidly escalating panic. Mark, standing awkwardly beside David, looked like he'd seen a ghost. His smug smirk having dissolved into a terrified rictus. I stepped forward, moving from my quiet vantage point near the exhibition, my silhouette framed against the damning light of the projector, my voice calm but amplified by the sudden, stunned silence that had fallen over the ballroom, carried with chilling clarity. My apologies for the interruption. It seems there was a slight omission in tonight's presentation. I gestured to the screen where the evidence continued to cycle. Each image a fresh wound, a new truth. These are the original designs, I announced, pointing to my blueprints. The ones deemed too green and not luxurious enough for Sterling. And this, I swept my hand to indicate the financial documents and the personal emails, is how they intended to improve their position at my expense. A future built on a foundation of lies and theft. The room erupted. Whispers turned to shouts. Guests, initially frozen, now pulled out their phones, some snapping photos of the screen, others frantically texting, trying to decipher what was happening. David, his face a mask of abject terror, stumbled off the stage, making a desperate, Beeline for me, pushing through bewildered guests. Patricia and Robert were on their feet, their expressions a horrifying blend of rage and despair, their carefully constructed world imploding around them. Mark stood paralyzed, unable to move, his award now a meaningless prop. "Sarah, what the hell are you doing?" David hissed, finally reaching me, his voice a desperate, strangled whisper, barely audible above the rising clamor. "You're ruining everything. You're ruining us." He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong, almost bruising. I shook him off, my gaze steady, unwavering. "Ruining your everything, David," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in his. "You thought I wasn't family. You thought I could be dismissed, my work stolen, my life discarded. You thought you could orchestrate my exit from your life as neatly as you did this gala. I simply changed the ending." I held up a small, encrypted USB drive from my clutch, not to him, but to the room, to the reporters now swarming. "This contains all the detailed evidence," I announced, looking directly at a prominent financial reporter I recognized from the Wall Street Journal, who was already scribbling furiously, his camera crew already recording the chaos. Every design, document, every email, every fraudulent financial transaction. I'm sure it will make for fascinating reading for your millions of subscribers and for the SEE. His eyes widened further as the full implications sank in. "No, Sarah, please. We can talk about this. I can explain about Emily, about everything." He was practically pleading now, his aristocratic facade crumbling into dust, revealing the hollow core beneath. "I'm sure you can," I said, my gaze unwavering. "The problem is, I've seen the financial statements, David. I've seen the emails. I know the Sterling Empire is crumbling, and I know you've been hiding assets. Planning to throw me aside for a better financial alliance?" His sharp intake of breath confirmed what I already knew. He never expected me to discover these things. He had underestimated me just as his family had from the beginning. They had seen an architect, a wife, a convenient accessory. They had never seen the woman who had built her own empire from nothing, who understood the intricate dance of contracts and evidence, who valued integrity above all else. They certainly didn't expect a deep understanding of forensic accounting, the investigation, of financial records for legal purposes, or the meticulousness of an architect in documentation. Those were private. "My personal business," he stammered, his voice cracking, desperate. Yes, they were. Just like the texts from Emily about the baby. Just like the script for announcing our divorce tonight. Just like the seating arrangement deliberately excluding me, I countered, the calmness in my voice belying the silent, triumphant scream within. Silence on the line. In the ballroom, I could see Patricia now, her face contorted in a silent scream, pointing at the screen, where the evidence of their financial ruin and David's deceit continued to play. Several other diners were watching with undisguised interest, some openly recording with their phones. The Sterling's humiliation was becoming a very public spectacle, exactly what they had planned for me. But with a horrifying, satisfying twist of fate, my phone, which I had deliberately kept on silent, vibrated in my hand, David calling now, not texting. I declined the call, watching as he stared at his phone, then looked at me, a desperate, frantic plea in his eyes. He tried again. This time, I answered Sarah. He hissed, his voice a raw mixture of fury and panic. "What the hell are you doing? You're ruining everything. You're ruining us." He was practically hyperventilating, ignoring the stares of the few remaining guests near us. "Ruining your everything, David," I repeated calmly, the words feeling like pure, unadulterated freedom on my tongue. "You thought I wasn't family, didn't you? You thought I was just a convenient tool. So I'm not responsible for your family's legacy or its downfall. You need to fix this right now. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for my mother? For all of us?" He practically screamed, his voice strained on the verge of breaking. I have exactly the idea, David. That was the point, I replied, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. Where are you? His voice changed, desperation creeping in, a pathetic whimper. We need to talk. I can explain about Emily, about everything. I'm sure you can, I said, my gaze unwavering. The problem is, I've seen the financial statements. David, I've seen the emails. I know the Sterling Empire is crumbling, and I know you've been hiding assets offshore. Planning to throw me aside for a better financial alliance with Emily's family before filing for divorce. His sharp intake of breath confirmed what I already knew. He never expected me to discover these things. He'd underestimated me, just as his family had from the beginning. They saw an architect, a wife, a convenient accessory. They never saw the woman who had built her own empire from nothing, who understood the intricate dance of contracts and evidence, who valued integrity above all else. They certainly didn't expect a deep understanding of forensic accounting, the investigation, of financial records for legal purposes, or the meticulousness of an architect in documentation. Those were private, my personal business, he stammered, his voice cracking, desperate. Yes, they were. Just like the texts from Emily about the baby, just like the script for announcing our divorce tonight, just like the seating arrangement deliberately excluding me. I countered, the calmness in my voice belying the silent, triumphant scream within. Silence on the line. In the ballroom, I could see Patricia now, her face contorted in a silent scream, pointing at the screen, where the evidence of their financial ruin and David's deceit continued to play. Several other diners were watching with undisguised interest, some openly recording with their phones. The Sterling's humiliation was becoming a very public spectacle, exactly what they had planned for me. But with a horrifying, satisfying twist of fate. Sarah, please. David's voice had lost all its aristocratic confidence, replaced by genuine desperation. You don't understand what this will do to us, to the family. We can work this out. Come back to the hotel. I'll meet you there in 20 minutes. David, I don't think we can work this out, I stated, my voice firm and resolute. I ended the call and stepped out from my hiding place, walking directly towards the main entrance. It was time for my final appearance as a Sterling dot as I approached. The remaining guest, who stared at me with a mixture of awe and shock, I caught the eye of the financial reporter. I discreetly handed him the USB drive. All the details are here, I whispered, giving him a knowing look. He nodded, his eyes alight with the scent of a breaking story. I paused at the threshold of the ballroom, turning back one last time. David, Patricia, and Robert were huddled together, their faces a mixture of confusion, terror, and incandescent rage. Mark stood nearby, looking utterly defeated, his crystal award now lying shattered on the floor beside him. In that moment, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a profound sense of liberation. The invisible chains that had bound me to their world of deceit and superficiality had finally shattered. I walked out of the St. Regis into the crisp new York night, a free woman. I left New York City the next morning. There was no grand exit, no dramatic monologue. It's just a quiet, resolute departure. I had already booked a first-class ticket on a direct flight back to Portland, using the copious frequent flyer miles I'd accumulated on David's behalf during various Sterling Group business trips. The irony wasn't lost on me as I settled into the plush seat, sipping a mimosa. Behind me, I left a family in utter crisis, their carefully constructed facades of wealth, integrity, and social standing crumbling in real dash time. My phone, which I finally took off silent mode during my layover, in Denver was a cacophony of incoming messages. News alerts flooded my screen from every major financial publication. The Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Forbes. Headlines screamed, Sterling Group faces immediate SEC inquiry after shocking gala revelation. Architect Sarah Hayes accuses Sterling heir of design theft, financial fraud, and marital deceit. And Sterling Group's future in doubt as investors pull funds. The detailed evidence I had provided to the reporter went viral, undeniable proof of their calculated betrayal and pervasive fraud. Social media was ablaze, dissecting every screenshot, every email, every damning detail. The hashtag HeritageGate hashtag trended for days. I didn't respond to any of them. Thirsts were empty. Their pleas too late. Instead, I forwarded all the detailed financial and design documentation I'd gathered, now public knowledge, to my lawyer. A sharp, no-nonsense attorney in Seattle known for handling complex intellectual property and white-collar fraud cases. Her instruction was simple: hold them securely. If the Sterlings pursue litigation, we will be prepared. And we will countersue for intellectual property infringement and defamation, given their public remarks. When I arrived home to my modern, minimalist apartment in Portland, the one I had bought and designed myself before marrying David, the one he had always dismissed as quaint compared to our sprawling New York townhouse, I felt a profound sense of relief. It was smaller, yes, but it was mine. Every clean line, every thoughtfully chosen material resonated with my core principles. I immediately hired a moving company to pack my personal belongings. I took only what was unquestionably mine: my clothes, the artwork I'd acquired before our marriage, my beloved collection of rare architecture books, and the custom-designed furniture I had personally built for my first office. Everything else, including the lavish wedding gifts and items purchased jointly, I left behind. I wanted nothing that could tie me to the Sterlings' web of deceit, nothing that carried the taint of their manipulation. The symbolic shedding of their possessions felt like a cleansing ritual. 2 days later, the Portland Tribune ran a front-page story: local architect exposes Sterling Group scandal. Allegations of fraud and design theft rock real estate giant. It wasn't just a society item. It was a deep dive into the Sterling Group's precarious financial state and their questionable business practices, quoting anonymous sources close to the firm and referencing the now viral video from the gala. The article even included a direct quote from an SEC spokesperson confirming an active inquiry into the Sterling Group's financials and possible insider trading. The ripples I had created were now crashing waves. A week after I returned to Portland, David appeared at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find him looking utterly haggard. His usually perfectly coiffed dark hair disheveled, his expensive suit rumpled. The polished veneer of privilege was gone, replaced by genuine desperation, raw and unfiltered. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You need to come home, Sarah," he said, his voice raspy, his eyes bloodshot. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, running his hands through his hair. "This has gone far enough. This is insane. My father had a minor heart attack, Sarah. He's in the hospital." "This isn't a negotiating tactic, David," I replied calmly, my voice steady, my expression unyielding. I closed the door behind him. "This is divorce, and it's long overdue." He paced my small living room, a stark contrast to the sprawling Manhattan duplex we had shared. "The SEC is looking into father's accounts," he blurted out, his voice laced with panic. "2 major board members have resigned. Mother had to cancel her charity gala next month because 3 major donors pulled out after the New York debacle. It's a nightmare, Sarah. A complete and utter nightmare." "Sounds like a Sterling family problem," I replied, crossing my arms, a small knowing smile playing on my lips. "Not mine. My firm is thriving, actually. Inquiries are up." He stopped pacing, turning to face me, his eyes wide, a flicker of his old arrogance returning, quickly snuffed out by fear. "It is your problem if I go down with the ship," he countered, his voice rising. "We're still married, Sarah. My debts are your debts. You'll be implicated in all of this. All our assets are frozen." I allowed myself a small, sardonic laugh. "Not when I have proof that you deliberately excluded me from financial decisions, hid assets with the intent to defraud me in divorce proceedings, and, most damningly, stole my intellectual property." My lawyer assures me that's more than enough to protect me. In fact, I added, my voice dropping. We're discussing a counterclaim for intellectual property theft and emotional distress. You see, David, I wasn't just designing buildings. I was also documenting every single interaction, every email, every subtle manipulation. It's an architect's habit. Meticulous record keeping. Its facade cracked completely then. David's shoulders slumped, and he sank onto my minimalist sofa, head in his hands. He looked utterly defeated, a golden boy whose world had suddenly turned to ash. I never wanted it to be like this, he mumbled, his voice muffled. I swear, what did you want, David? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion, yet firm. To marry me for my architectural skills. To use me to legitimize your sustainable projects while you reconnected with Emily and secured her family's investment. To discard me when I was no longer useful, neatly and quietly, just like a disposable blueprint. He lifted his head, his eyes meeting mine, raw with a mix of shame and residual anger. It wasn't like that in the beginning, Sarah, he said quietly, his voice barely audible. I did care about you, truly. But Mother, the company. It was all falling apart. Emily's family was our last chance. But not enough to stand up to your family. I finished for him, my voice flat. Not enough to be honest about your affair. Not enough to respect my work or me as an equal partner. Not enough to keep your word. You prioritized a corporate bailout over your integrity, over our marriage. I paused, then delivered the final blow. When is the wedding with Emily? And her family's investment? I hear they've already pulled out. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. How did you? My lawyer has everything, David, I interrupted, a cruel satisfaction uncurling in my chest. Congratulations. I hope she appreciates your business acumen. Or lack thereof, as the case may be. A heavy silence fell between us. Outside, the steady Portland rain began to tap against the windows of my new apartment, smaller than our brownstone in New York. But mine alone, paid for with the hard-earned proceeds from a business I'd built without sterling money or connections. It felt clean, honest, and truly mine. I'll give you whatever you want. Sarah, David finally said, looking up, his eyes bloodshot, his voice barely a whisper. Just sign an NDA. Name your price. This can't go on. The company. We'll collapse. We'll lose everything. That was the moment I realized the Sterlings still didn't understand me at all. After 5 years, they still saw me as someone who could be bought, someone motivated by the same material concerns that drove their existence. They still believed everyone had a price. They saw only the financial and social cost, never the moral. I don't want your money, David, I said, standing up and indicating our conversation was ending. I want my freedom. I want the truth acknowledged. Want my intellectual property secured. The documents stay with my lawyer unless you try to drag me down with you. The divorce terms are simple. I walk away with what's mine. You with what's yours, and Emily and her family's collapsed investment. That's between you and your conscience. I hope you'll be a better partner to her than you were to me. He didn't argue. He simply stood, a broken man, and walked out, leaving a faint scent of desperation lingering in my quiet, peaceful apartment. After David left, I stood by the window, watching the Portland rain intensify, washing the city clean. The storm of my marriage had finally broken, and though there was a lingering ache of what could have been, there was also an immense sense of calm, a lightness I hadn't felt in years. The scandal unfolded gradually over the following weeks, played out across the pages of national business journals and society columns. The New York Times and the Wall Street Journal ran more extensive investigative pieces on the Sterling Group's financial irregularities and the ethical questions surrounding their business practices. They detailed the hidden debts, the questionable offshore accounts, and the Heritage Tower project, once a symbol of their future, now a monument to their hubris. Longtime clients quietly, then not so quietly, withdrew their portfolios, unwilling to be associated with such public disgrace. Patricia's position on 3 prestigious charity boards became emeritus rather than active, a polite euphemism for being quietly pushed out. Her calls for donations now met with polite but firm refusals. Emily's family, after the public humiliation and the significant financial risk, formally backed out of their investment deal, leaving the Sterlings in an even deeper financial hole. David and Emily were still together, a hollow, strained alliance. But their wedding was postponed indefinitely, their public image irreversibly tarnished. The high society of New York, ever eager for fresh gossip, had a new cautionary tale. My business, Hayes Architecture, thrived despite or perhaps because of the scandal. The story that circulated wasn't about a scorned wife, but about a brilliant professional who refused to be used and discarded, who stood up for her work, her values, and her integrity. Clients who had once looked down on my green approach or dismissed my firm as too boutique now sought me out, appreciating my unwavering honesty and formidable talent. They saw that I wasn't just an architect. I was a protector of vision. The inquiries poured in, not just from the Pacific Northwest, but from across the country. My team expanded, hiring more like-minded architects who shared my passion for truly sustainable design, establishing Hayes Architecture as a leading voice in ethical, environmentally conscious building. We received multiple industry awards, not for flash, but for genuine, verifiable impact. The divorce was finalized swiftly, without drama. The Sterlings, too busy grappling with collapsing finances and a plummeting reputation, agreed to my terms without argument. I retained full intellectual property rights to all my designs, including every single blueprint and concept for the Heritage Tower, which, in a satisfying twist of fate, David had no choice but to acknowledge in the legal documents. He publicly issued a terse, carefully worded statement, acknowledging my significant contributions to the project and apologizing for any misunderstandings regarding credit. It wasn't a heartfelt apology, but it was enough. It was public. It was legally binding. It was truth. Sean and Emily were still together. Their relationship, a precarious balance of shared desperation and lingering resentment. I heard through mutual acquaintances that their life was a constant struggle to maintain appearances overshadowed by debt and public scrutiny. I sent no gift, no message. Their story was no longer mine. On the 1-year anniversary of that fateful gala night in New York, I found myself standing on the construction site of my new major architectural project in Seattle. It wasn't just a building. It was a living testament to my vision. This was the Catalyst Tower, a groundbreaking mixed-use development, entirely focused on net zero energy, producing as much energy as it consumes, and regenerative design, creating buildings that enhance rather than deplete their environments, closing parenthesis dot, from the ground up. The Catalyst Tower was a marvel of bioclimatic integration, designing with the local climate in mind. Its south-facing facade was a shimmering cascade of integrated photovoltaic glass panels that generate solar electricity, turning the building itself into a power plant. The north side featured a complex system of double-skin facades, 2 layers of glass with an air cavity for insulation and ventilation that regulated indoor temperature naturally, minimizing the need for conventional HVAC. The top floors boasted a sprawling urban farm, fed by a sophisticated rainwater harvesting and graywater recycling system, literally putting food back into the community. As I watched the steel beams rise against the backdrop of the Puget Sound, casting a long, clean shadow, phone in hand, coordinating with a dedicated team of ethical contractors who respected my vision, I realized something profound and unexpected. I was happy. Not despite the collapse of my marriage, but because of calls. The Sterlings had tried to make me feel small, to reduce me to an accessory in their grand narrative of power and wealth. They had tried to steal my talent, my identity, and my future. Instead, they had inadvertently freed me. They had forced me to confront the illusion of my happiness, the compromises I had made, and the erosion of my self-worth. In losing what I thought I wanted, their acceptance, a traditional marriage, a place in their privileged world, I had found what I actually needed, not validation from a family determined to exploit me, but the courage to reject a life built on appearances, and to fiercely protect my own creations, my own integrity, my own truth. I raised my hand, shielding my eyes from the golden glow of the setting sun, its rays glinting off the newly installed photovoltaic glass of the Catalyst Tower. I closed my eyes, picturing the chaotic ballroom, the flickering screen, the shock on David's face. I toasted silently to the stolen design, to the public humiliation, to the painful but necessary truth that had shown me exactly where I belonged. Not as a silent, invisible contributor to someone else's legacy, but as the proud architect of my own. The Catalyst Tower wasn't just a building. It was my symbol of resilience, a tangible manifestation of my reclamation, standing tall against the horizon, vibrant and alive. My journey was a painful one, but it was also a testament to the power of reclaiming your narrative. If you've ever felt like your work, your passion, or your voice has been stolen, dismissed, or overshadowed in a relationship, I hope my story resonates with you. Your worth isn't dictated by someone else's validation. It comes from within, from your integrity, your talent, and your courage to stand up for what's right. Have you ever had to draw a clear boundary to protect your work or your sense of self? What was your moment of reclamation? Share your story in the comments below. Let's empower each other to rise.